Good morning, everyone, and a warm welcome to today's webinar entitled Behind the Pump, where together we'll be discussing the potential impacts of e-fuels from three different perspectives from Europe's electromobility industries, from drivers and from consumers, as well as Europe's energy autonomy. My name is Chris Heron. I'm with e-Mobility Europe, the trade association uniting the entire European e-mobility ecosystem. I'll be your moderator for today's discussion. The event is organized by the Platform for Electromobility, an informal coalition of over 40 NGOs, associations, and companies working to shape EU legislation that enables electric mobility. Before we begin, a quick notice to the audience. There is a chat box that you should see there on your screen. That's there for you to provide your questions and comments as we proceed through the discussion. We'll do our best to be answering as many as possible of those in the Q&A. I'll be directing those to our great speakers. Before we dive into content, I'll briefly outline the agenda we have ahead of us for the next 90 minutes. Firstly, we'll hear a video message from one of our two sponsor MEPs, MEP Lena Schilling, who, although unfortunately unable to join us in person today, has provided us with framing remarks to start our conversation off. We'll then dive straight into three short presentations, each providing a different perspective on the impacts of introducing e-fuels into the EU's car CO2 regulation. After each of those presentations, our second sponsor MEP, Michael Bloss, will intervene with his quick reaction and discussions. And after that, we'll have an exchange with the audience on the specific questions and comments in those presentations. After each presentation, we'll have a comprehensive Q&A talking about the issue in general, before finally I hand over to Kinga Timaru-Cast, Chair of the Platform for Electromobility, to conclude the session with her closing remarks. So we have a busy schedule ahead of us. Very happy to have people here on the line. And I think now, to start us off, we will hear the welcome video from MEP Lena Schilling. And hopefully our technical team will be putting that on screen.
Hello, everybody. Unfortunately, I cannot join you today, but it's an honor for me to welcome you to this very timely workshop. The European transport sector is, smoothly said, a little bit of a mess right now. The Commission wants to water down a law that guides away from combustion engines. At the same time, CO2 emissions continue to climb. Misleading mock solutions promises remedy when just covering the ecological impacts and pollution is incredibly risking public health. Sounds pretty serious. But instead of taking action, it often seems like we're just waiting and hoping for some savior to come around and take this load of us. Now Easter came and passed, the savior has not arrived, and it will not arrive. Whether we like it or not, we'll need to get active ourselves. But, and that's the good thing, we have everything we need to fight this crisis. Electric cars are not perfect yet. Don't get me wrong, but they are by far the closest thing we have to the real deal. So instead of trying stubbornly to find a different way, let's just try to improve the one that we have. When Europe was once in a good position on EVs, we have long fallen behind other regions and now risk falling even below the global average. Reversing this is what I understand to be our responsibility in this house. We have to focus on the most efficient solutions and try to support them as much as possible. No ifs, no buts, and no intransparent lobbyism should prevent us. And sure, if someone comes up with another solution that allows us to drive our combustion cars absolutely net zero, let's adopt it. But right now, the Commission proposal would only lead us to spend more time and resources to the solitary tools when we could be out there deploying our solutions. I can relate to a little procrastination, but we need to stop sitting around and start taking matters in our hand and finally go down the path of successfully support a just and environmental sound transition in our transport sector. On that note, I want to wish you a very insightful webinar, and I'm looking forward to hearing about all of the outcomes of this afterwards.
Motivating words from MEP Schilling with a clear call to action for Europe moving forwards more purposefully and confidently towards its 2035 zero emissions objectives. and also a warning not to get distracted along the way by false solutions, while of course remaining open to whichever is the most effective, the most efficient way forward to address both the industrial and environmental challenges that we have ahead of us. We're going to now move to hear from our three speakers and also again bring in our second host MEP, Mr. Michael Bloss. How we're going to do it, I'm just going to remind all speakers that you have between 10 to 12 minutes for your presentations. After each of those presentations, we'll bring in our MP for his reactions throughout the discussion, and we'll move forwards. Each presenter is speaking as members of the Platform for Electromobility, not necessarily on behalf of their organization, so they'll be bringing the platform's position into the discussions. And our first presentation will be from Paul Wilczek, the head of energy policy, climate and sustainability at Eurelectric. Paul, thanks for joining us this morning. You'll be talking to us about the energy perspective on synthetic fuels and your perspectives on why and how to prioritize energy efficiency in transport. So Paul, the floor is yours.
Thanks a lot, Chris, and good morning, everybody. Happy to join this morning. I wanted to give you a couple of background slides in terms of where we are going with regards to our electrification agenda and also in terms of decarbonization and its meaningfulness for electricity use in the transport sector. So as you see, the decarbonization of the power sector so far has been quite a success story. So these are the statistics from up to last year on how we went on with our renewables rollout, with our overall decarbonization of the electricity mix in Europe. We surged to a historic 50% by the beginning of this year with regards to renewables in the EU electricity mix, together with other clean electricity sources of about 24%. We have now an electricity mix in the EU which is 3/4 actually already decarbonized, and we are moving forward further. So we saw also that the first time this year we saw that wind energy actually surpassed natural gas in power generation. So the decarbonization agenda in the power sector is a success story. We are moving on. And if you move to the next slide, you can see the outlook for also the coming years and decades. We are on track really to have expected 70% roughly of renewables by 2030 in the power sector. The power sector will be decarbonized as we move forward. Here you see the predictions from our side at Eurelectric with our own studies of how we will develop with regards to a fully decarbonized power sector to 2040 and with an outlook to 2050, where really fossil fuel use will be very marginal. Now, this is, of course, a success story for the power sector. However, most of the economy beyond that is still running on fossil fuels. And this is, of course, quite the worrying part of it. If we move to the next slide, you can see that electrification is not only sensible in terms of a decarbonized and cost-efficient way of using energy, but also a powerful security of supply lever that is probably pretty important now in the times of geopolitical turmoil. Let's just step back a bit and look at where are the energy imports actually being used for. Very little, as you can see here in this graph, is actually used for for the power sector, for power generation use, and much more for end-use sectors, which after all can be electrified. So overall, we are using a staggering 45 billion euros a year for energy imports, fossil fuel imports into the European Union. And here in this graph, you can see a breakdown what it means in terms of share of GDP spent on these net fossil fuel imports in the various major economies. Of course, you see here, the mind-boggling exposure of some Asian countries, but right next comes Spain, Italy, Germany, France, so major economies in the European Union that spend really up to 4% of the overall GDP on net fossil fuel imports. As you see here in the dark blue, rather little is used then for power generation, but the vast majority is used for the end-use sectors such as transport, which can all be avoided with electrification. Hence, making the case for security of supply, avoiding imports for countries that are probably not so friendly to us all the time in terms of political, level playing field and human rights protection, are importing and selling us vast amounts of fossil fuels. All of this can be avoided and our security of supply enhanced in the European Union. If we move to the next slide, this is then zooming in into the various sectors, in particular, of course, transport. In transport, it's even more the case. So the technologies are not only readily available. We all know electric vehicles in road transport are the dominating, one of the dominating and cost-efficient technologies. In other sectors, it's looking also quite good. Heat pumps, also industrial heat pumps, and especially in the low heat segments are available. But here you see the percentage of the fossil fuel final energy demand that can be displaced in transport. It's 4/5 literally in road transport that can be displaced through electric vehicles, and the replacement solutions are readily available, as we see here. So this is obviously very, very good for the transport sector that we have this technology right there. If we move to the next slide. Is basically then looking at where we stand with electrification rates in Europe. It's still very low, in fact. Looking at the overall electrification rates, they are actually stagnating in Europe. So this is only about 23% that we have in terms of electrification as a ratio of final energy demand. Of course, this is bound to change now with the adoption of EVs and heat pumps as well. In transport, it was a very low segment, as you see, in terms of electrification rates of not over 1.9%. But this is now, of course, increasing with the adoption of EVs. But we need signals to grow electrification to enhance our decarbonization agenda in terms of cost effectiveness. Our projection is we need to reach an electrification rate of 35% by 2030, up to 61% in 2050, in order to stay within our projections of decarbonization pathways that we have in the European Union and climate neutrality. So yeah, this is what we have in terms of outlooks, in terms of current status on electrification as a backdrop of the discussion. So yeah, it is good for transport. We need to enhance therefore our drive for EV uptake in the European Union. It is cost efficient in terms of its energy efficiency. I think that is being proved in quite some studies right now. And here also, just in addition, in terms of the security of supply dimension that is being heavily discussed now in European energy politics. So avoiding imports, avoiding fossil fuel imports from outside of the European Union makes not only economical sense, but also a security of supply geopolitical sense for the European Union and for our customers. I'll maybe stop here and open the floor for reactions, also from the member of the European Parliament, Michael Bloss. So very happy to engage in the discussion and also with the other participants. Thank you.
Well, super framing of our discussion. So I take from that electrification is already a European decarbonization success story. It's happening. It's displacing fossil fuels. There's an energy efficiency aspect and also an energy security aspect. And there's a really important systems perspective to electrifying transport here too. Michael, great to have you here. We're going to bring you in a few times along this discussion, which is on the road forwards and all of these different technologies that we're using in our transport mix. Thanks for joining us. We already heard the strong call to action from your colleague, MEP Schilling. How would you react to Paul's presentation and the topic of this discussion overall?
Yeah, thank you for the invitation. It's nice to be here with you, and I think it's great that you're doing all of this work. I mean, maybe first of all, I think it's really important that we are putting forward all of these arguments for e-mobility and also electric cars, because what is happening, to my understanding, is a little bit of a a cultural war against e-mobility. So it's not discussed so much in terms of, you know, economics, in terms of efficiency, in terms of security, but it's more like some kind of as if this would be an ideological question, but it's not. Definitely, it's not. And you have been presenting this. I think it's really interesting that we made a study not even a year ago assessing the fossil imports costs for Germany and Europe. I think we were around 380 billion euros fossil imports for the European Union in 2023. That's a lot of money, and that's basically consumption spending. If we would invest this money into production facilities of renewables into grids, that would be actually a lot of money, and it would be an investment instead of a consumption. So that would then trigger lower costs in the future. So I think this has to be understood. I mean, in terms of what kind of macroeconomic loss fossil imports are. So it's great that you showed this. I think it's also interesting to again think about. I mean, one of the big topics that we currently have is, of course, the climate crisis and our decarbonization goals. But if you look into the Draghi report, they say that the big question for Europe is, for Europe's competitiveness, is high energy prices. And he basically says the long-term way forward is electrification. There's no other way around. I mean, Europe has structural high electricity prices, and with the exit from Russian pipeline gas, this will not change. And now we are, you know, there is negotiations happening with the US about purchasing fracking LNG gas from the US, which is structurally more expensive. And if this will stay in the European system and with our current electricity market model, this will structurally have higher electricity prices, because gas then sets the price most of the time. So it makes really a lot of sense to invest into electrification and in electrifying the transport sector. Yeah, and then I think, I mean, I'm not sure, I guess we're going to this. If we look at the car industry itself, we see already an amazing increase of EV sales all around the globe. I think yesterday the International Energy Agency published some data showing that it's really good, going up. There are some exceptions, Germany, some other countries in Europe, but here I really see that it's unfortunately this cultural ideological war that is happening, that is preventing the uptake, and it's actually putting all of our car manufacturers into a difficult position, because many have invested, heavily invested, and the biggest problem for car manufacturers right now is that they don't sell enough EV cars. And there's one reason, I think, is because they are too late to developing them. Of Chinese brands, and the Chinese market is completely vanishing for European car manufacturers, especially in EV cars. And it's not really like, it's absolutely clear that this will happen in Europe as well. And if Chinese car manufacturers come to Europe with their cheap EVs, then this will be a huge competition for European manufacturers, and I'm not sure they will win it. So they better get started, and they got started. So now changing legislation, basically delaying again, when delaying was always the problem that brought us into this misery, it's not the right solution. The right solution is speeding up, supporting, And there are several measures that can be done, but just delaying, like we did now with the 2025 target, but the big kind of attack on the 2035 target that will come, it's just, I think, brings the European car manufacturers into a deep problem, because, well, you better know how to do new technologies. Nokia did not survive by choosing not to go for the full screen display. And I don't think that European car manufacturers will survive by choosing not to go for EVs. Maybe that's the first thing. I have several inputs here, so I will not talk
We'll be bringing you in. Indeed. Lots to bring in. We have several questions coming in too, and some of them are indeed focusing on the upcoming review of the CO2 standards. That will be coming to your desk, I guess, sometime next year in the European Parliament. You mentioned it's a cultural war already. You mentioned there are really important aspects of this debate, like energy security, which aren't being emphasized enough. Paul, you said that too. One of the questions we got before I move to our next presentation was just, is this whole discussion on 2035 going to delay things further? And looking at some of these other things like synthetic fuels, like how can we keep on track when, as the European Parliament, you're going to be spending a lot of the next time negotiating the fundamentals here? Michael, any quick response on that before we move on? And Paul, feel free to come in.
Big questions. Absolutely. And I think the whole debate we have right now is about a delay. It's not about support measures for actually achieving these goals, but it's more about like delaying the target. Basically saying that after 2035, plug-in hybrids should still be allowed, or range extenders is now the big thing. It's a bit weird that we are discussing about range extenders in 2035 when we see the battery kind of developments that is happening right now. But hey, but there's also some that want to kind of get rid of this legislation altogether. The majority is shifted quite a lot. So there is now a right-wing majority, and especially the EPP, so the Conservative Party group, they really also in like this cultural war mentality. So I mean, if they want to push it through, they can do a right-wing majority and really rip this whole legislation apart. It's also funny that we see that they want to put the revision and the review earlier, even though in the text, in the legal text, it says the review should happen in 2026. Now the Commission already said it should go to 2025. We all know that the later we do the review in 2025, the better the numbers. So that's a bit political debate right now. So those who are against EVs, that will just want to have the review really early, but doesn't really make sense. This is stuff that is coming up, but I hope that you get active and also, you know, like make sure that also the right understands that it doesn't help the industry if you just wage this cultural war against e-mobility.
Paul, anything you'd like to come in on that before we move on?
Yeah, just a quick note on the figures on the fossil fuel imports. You said 380 billion a year. We have studies that say 450 billion. It's still over 1 billion a day that we are spending in the European Union for fossil fuel imports. So it's whichever figure, it's really so much. And most of it is for oil. So this is really petrol. Just to bear that in mind, yeah. So it's because you mentioned LNG, but we are really spending the vast majority for oil imports, and that obviously goes into road transport. No, so this is just something to outline. So the electrification of transport contributes so much to avoiding these costs. Just to underline that. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. We'll move now to our next speaker, which is Adrien Rambaud, who's the Public Affairs Officer at Electra, a very visible charging point operator in France, Belgium, and other countries too. And Adrien, you're here to provide your industrial perspective. Stop diverging, stop disrupting investments. Adrien, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chris. Good morning, everyone, and thank you to our MEP sponsor to be here with us today. So as the charge point operator, we are key actor into for people to go electric, to go into the mobility world. And today we see that integrating e-fuels, going for carbon neutrality is key. And especially in the post-2035 regulatory debate we're having now in the CO2 reforms debate, instability disturbs investment and make transition at risk. From a CPO perspective, we advocate for policies that prioritize energy efficiency, affordability, and transparency for all consumers. The current proposal to expand e-fuels usage puts all these principles at risk, and the EU, as it's currently revising the CO2 standards for car and vans, as discussed previously, we're facing a momentum, and we believe that we need to advocate that adopting these e-fuels along with other technologies as keeping PHEVs or having new extended range vehicles into road will impact European consumers, from risking cost to regulatory confusion, and ultimately having consequences for public health and air quality beyond 2035. Significant investments have already been done by many actors in the mobility sector, and especially by CPOs. In 3 years, these industrial acts have been concrete. We went from 20 to 15 to 20,000 fast charging stations in Europe in 2022, and we are today at more than 150, and we keep 150,000, and we keep investing because we believe in electric mobility, and that's the future. There are several reasons for us to be firm about the terrible impact of technological neutrality by 2030. For example, e-fuels are going to cost more for consumers than battery electric vehicles, 2.5 to 3 times more. And while we see that there's argument that, of course, e-fuels prices will go down, but battery electric technology is already progressing rapidly, and it's becoming every day more and more accessible to everyone. It's the only scalable and cost-effective solutions we have today. Imposing e-fuels, having PHEVs included into regulations, having these extended range vehicles will only impose higher cost for both consumers and society, as mentioned before, because we don't have fossil fuels in Europe. We rely on importations. Battery electric vehicles are the best options. They are already on the table, and we need to adopt them as soon as possible to maintain the investments that have been done. Also, according to the last IEA report already mentioned, TCO is very favorable for battery electric vehicles in Europe, but also in the rest of the world. We see that compared to extended range vehicles, plug-in hybrid vehicles, or ICE cars, there's no discussion. Going for decarbonized mobility will make households richer, because they will gain some gain power. They will increase their power to purchase and gain more. To be more active. But this we see in the current debate that inconsistent policies and the timeline create uncertainty for investments and for consumers. As CPOs, we currently invested and we rely on these policies, but we are also working hard to build resilient infrastructures to go to allow people to go electric, to adopt electric mobility. And in light of the recent announced flexibilities and the debate that is currently going on, we see in many studies, for example, on transport environment ones, that numbers of electric cars is also will reduce because of the flexibilities. We need to keep focus to see that integrating new e-fuels will only reduce by 2035 the numbers of battery electric vehicles in the road. From the CPO perspective, we rely heavily on this regulatory predictability because we invested collectively over 10 billion euros since 2020, and this number is about to be tripled in the next years. Because we need more charging infrastructures along the main roads, but also in rural places and across Europe, not only in Western Europe. Going for e-fuels, it's also the Pandora box for fraud and ambiguity. If you can go to next slide, please. Because e-fuels are fossil fuels and they are chemically identical. And we need to be sure that they won't be integrated, because consumers could unknowingly be sold polluting fuels, marketing as clean, and fueling ICE cars, PHEV or EREVs cannot be the solution, because we will only rely on fossil fuels that we don't have in Europe. And we already see that the other technologies than battery electric vehicles are emitting much more CO2 as battery electric vehicles, even in the worst cases, produced with bad energy, with fossil energy, the battery. But even then, battery electric vehicles is competitive, and in Europe, as showing by Paul before, electricity is getting more and more decarbonized based on renewables, and going for electric mobility is absolutely key. We're not the only one to invest as CPOs in the mobility world, but grid infrastructures is also getting better. You see that over 30 billion euros is invested yearly in the grid to get ready for electrifications, to allow gigafactories to be built in Europe, to have charge point operators deployed everywhere, and we absolutely rely on that. E-fuels are so extremely energy intensive, and producing them requires up to 5 times more energy than direct electrification. It's the easiest way at a time when Europe is already grappling with high energy prices to lose again competitiveness. Everything about battery electric vehicle is about our industrial competitiveness. The real priority, as mentioned in the affordable energy plan of the Commission, is to develop CFDs, to develop power purchase agreements, to allow CPOs to sell electricity at a low price, but also to have OEMs being able to build cars in Europe as efficiently as possible. And once electricity will become truly affordable and fully decarbonized, switching to electric mobility will be easier than ever. Meanwhile, weighing that, CPOs are heavily investing. We see, for example, looking at the half-year targets, that every country is in line and overstepping all the objective of the EU Commission. 26 of the 27 EU member states are respecting the half-year targets. And that's why investing in electric transition strengthens our industrial foundations, not weakens them. In the context of the CO2 standards revision, it is crucial for all EU policymakers to reaffirm the ultimate goal of maintaining these targets of 2030 and 2035 in order to make Europe competitive in a global market. Because everything is about the competitiveness of our economy against China, against the United States, and we need to have businesses to grow in Europe to be competitive in this market.
Adrian, you've provided a strong competitiveness argument to this discussion, and this is a key part of the cultural war that was mentioned before, I would say as well. But your perspective a CPO who's making investments, creating jobs, driving the electricity transition forward now, today on the ground. You've also been very clear that all of the uncertainty that comes from some of this discussion around e-fuels and other technologies makes your plans harder. And that can be frustrating when you're trying to create the jobs that we need as Europe in this climate. Michael, over to you on this economic context. Europe's in a difficult place today, obviously, and often electric vehicles are framed as part of the problem to this, not part of the solution. What would be the message there that you would bring in reaction to Adrian's remarks today?
Yeah, I'm from Stuttgart, and Stuttgart is one of the strongest automotive industry region with Mercedes and Porsche and Bosch. So we're really dependent on it, and I have a huge interest that the European automotive industry survives and strives. But I think around 20 years or 15 years ago, like European car manufacturers had around 40% of the Chinese market. Chinese market is the biggest one in the world. I think around 30 million or something like this. We have an overall new, like around 90 million overall in the world. And of this, in China, we already have half of the new cars being non-fossil cars. And in this section, I think European car manufacturers have around 2%. That's the problem. We have great cars, also like all this electric strategy of Mercedes, but we are they sell around, I don't know, like sometimes last year they sold around below 1,000, so like in the hundreds, I think 100, 200 of the C-Class in China. That's the problem. It has nothing to do with like ambitious targets or something like this. It's really the problem that we are missing and we are losing this race. So I think, if you want to be competitive, you need to win this. So that's my view on this, and I think most of them know it. Just the problem is really that Chinese e-car manufacturers are quite ahead of us. I always talk with Bosch, biggest automotive supplier in the world, and they had a decision not to invest into battery technology. But like this is the core of the car of the future. So that's a real. Of course you can, I don't know, do some screws and I don't know, like lights and all of this, but this will not bring you the value add that you need. So I think one of the questions, of course, is how can we, at least become par on battery technology production with China, which I think is super difficult. And in Europe, we need to put up new, a legal framework to go in this direction of joint ventures, a little bit like the Chinese did it, to get this technological transfer. So I think, we're just, I don't see any strategy in just saying, okay, they are better than that, so we continue with fossil or with the combustion engine and go for e-fuels. I think that's a bad strategy, and the reason is that, and you explained that e-fuels are super expensive. They will just structurally be more expensive than electric cars, because you have 3 times kind of change in from electrons to molecules to heat and power, and that's up like just physics that you lose a lot of efficiency. And it's really funny because I always quote then the German automotive association. So I don't think they can be deemed as being a green lobby organization, but they have this beautiful graph that says one wind power plant with 3 megawatt can power 1,600 EVs and 250 ICEs with e-fuels. So that shows you the efficiency loss that is there. And of course, if you then turn it around, of course, that means this is also absolutely more expensive than Electra. So if you have maybe, you know, a Porsche driver who has millions of euros and doesn't care, maybe he will be able to afford some e-fuels for, I don't know, 5 euros or something like this a liter. But a normal person who has to think about the operational costs will not go for e-fuels. That's just clear, and I think everyone knows it. So this e-fuel saga is just an attempt of the fossil lobby to create a lifeline for them. But it's just physics and economics that it's not going to be a solution if you have a much cheaper solution readily available. So therefore, I'm also not so much afraid about e-fuels because, I mean, who will do this? Even no car manufacturer is investing into kind of e-fuel only cars. And even if, I don't say there's, if you want to decarbonize the existing fleet, you can sell a lot of e-fuels, but I don't think it will happen. Then if it comes to the charging infrastructure, I think, I'm not sure you are kind of private and public charging infrastructure, but I think what really is where we really need to speed up is the question of flexibility. I think until now we do not have a European standard for bi-directional charging, and that really needs to happen because battery cars can be an integral part of our energy system. They can be an integral part of also stabilizing our energy system. We now saw that we had a blackout in Spain. But if you would be able, and this was because of some frequency issues, of course, if you have a lot of batteries connected to the grid, they can also help you stabilize the frequency if you are able to manage them from a central place. But that means you need to have some possibilities of bidirectional charging. And I think it's then you can, for private owners, that's really nice because you can make money with it. So I think that's really something where you have a win-win situation. Customers make money with it. You stabilize the electricity grid. You are also contributing to lower network grid charges because with more kind of battery storage on the local level, you don't need to build up your grid as much. So that's really great, but it really needs to happen soon. That this is coming and it can be used, and it can be also then a business case, and it also makes e-cars more popular. Because you can make money with it. Of course, it is something for people that own a house and are more rich. So the question is also with the public charging, and here I have to say also to you, these prices are too high, and that's a real problem. I don't know for the rest of Europe, but in Germany, the operational cost of an e-car are currently the same as of a fossil car. So there's really like the business or the case for e-cars was always investment costs. So like buying the car is maybe a bit more expensive, but the operational costs are cheaper because electricity is cheaper. Now, if you are publicly charging because you are renting, like me, you pay maybe double or triple the price of electricity at the charging station than you pay at home. And I understand that you also need to, get back your investment costs, but I think it's a little bit kind of do you say it in English? A question of a hen or an egg. So it's like what goes first?
Yes.
Do you say that? Okay, that's good.
You do chicken and eggs, and then
chicken egg, yeah.
Chickens and eggs.
So I think if you are reducing the price, that also makes e-mobility more attractive. Then you have a higher, usage of the charging station, and then you can also make money. But yeah, I think it's a real problem. Sometimes I think you pay in Germany if you don't have if you are not in a how to say, like in an abonnement system, you pay sometimes up to 90 cents per kilowatt hour, and at home currently I think you get a new contract with 25 cents per kilowatt hour. So here I think really something needs to change in order to make electromobility more attractive.
Thanks, Michael. I'm advised. I think what you say about all of this uncertainty which we're discussing around things like e-fuels and how they would be used, it's not necessarily the risk. Someone said in the comments, it's not necessarily the risk that they would become the mainstream technology, but more all of this uncertainty that's discussion is taking resources away from solving some of the challenges you've mentioned, like pricing. Every German MEP I've spoken to is mentioning that same question, whichever group you're in, but also bidirectional charging and everything else. So the allocation of resources in this debate is critical. I'm advised for timing, because I know, Michael, we only have you until 11, that we'll move straight to our next presentation from Lucien, and then we'll bring everyone else for the wrap-up discussions. So Lucien, very quickly, T&E's perspective, e-fuel specific, I think you're going to talk about. The floor is yours. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Chris. Good morning, everyone. I'm Lucien Mathieu. I'm the cars director at T&E. So T&E is a leading European advocate for clean transport and energy with a mission to decarbonize transport. So thank you very much for the invitation, and to the MEP sponsors. A lot of great things have already been said, but this morning I'm very glad to have the privilege to discuss a bit more on the price of e-fuels and the health impact, the air pollution, based on some of our latest research. So let's dive right into it and unpack what I would call the dirty little secrets of the e-fuel use in cars. So we have commissioned recently a study from a consultancy called Eurelectric, which is a consultancy specialized in electrochemical industry, to do a deep dive into the actual production costs of e-fuels and also market price. So this is really based on their industry expertise. They were able to model different steps of the production and make a realistic estimate of this production cost. So this is what we show here. So they have modeled two different production routes, one called here dedicated e-petrol production, that is kind of the technical term for that would be methanol to gasoline, and the other one is a co-product e-petrol via the Fischer-Tropsch process that is typically used to produce e-kerosene used in aviation. So these processes, they produce some synthetic oil that is similar to crude oil, and it has a mix of different chemicals that require certain steps and processing. But how do you actually produce e-fuels? So we see here the different steps. So the first part is that you need quite a lot of renewable electricity. This renewable electricity is used via electrolysis to produce green hydrogen. At the same time, so that was the orange part. At the same time, you need to capture CO2 from the air and then do the synthesis. So all of these steps, they require some energy and they require some capital investment, which means they have a certain cost in the production. And of course, this cost is much higher than the one for fossil petrol. And again, it was said just before, very well by Michael, this is due to the physics of the process that are just very energy intensive. As a result, this study shows that in 2030, the e-petrol production cost would be about 7 to 9 times more expensive than fossil petrol. And that is just the production cost. So if we go to the next slide, please. Then we also look at what it means actually at the pump for drivers, for European drivers. So that means that you need to add margins, because on top of production costs, fuel producers, distributors, they need to make a business, and you would also add VAT. So we used a flat VAT of 20% here. And what it shows is that the e-fuel price at the pump for without any additional taxes would be between 7 and 8 euros per liter. Now, maybe let's try to kind of let that sink in a little bit. Today's average price for gasoline at the pump is 1.6 euros per liter, and that kind of takes into account all the excise duty average European figure. And all of you are aware of kind of the crisis we had a few years ago with the Gilets jaunes in France, which was a reaction in the first place to an increase in fuel prices by just 6 cents per liter for diesel and 3 cents per liter on petrol. So the sensitivity of drivers on the fuel price is extremely high. And now, if you put that in perspective with a fuel price of 6 to 8 euros per liters, this really begs the question on kind of who would really be willing to pay such fuel. Next slide, please. Now we can also show. No, there should be slides before. Yes, thank you. We can also kind of look at what this means in terms of euros per liter and compare this with battery electric vehicles, as it was highlighted previously, which are much cheaper. So if we convert this price of 6 to 8 euros per liter, and we take into account the combustion of that fuel in the vehicle, which is also extremely inefficient. That's also important to understand that combustion engines are by nature, you lose 2/3 of the energy as heat, whereas the battery electric vehicle is many times more efficient. That means that throughout the process, you need 4 to 5 times more energy to drive the same distance on e-petrol than with a battery electric vehicle. If we look at the prices here, we're around 0.4 to 0.5 euros per kilometer when driving on e-fuels. We can compare this with 0.1 euro per liter with fossil petrol, and a similar amount if we just use public charging, fast public charging. So this is a bit of an extreme case, right? It's really the extreme case where somebody charges at an expensive fast charger for its electric vehicle. On the other hand, the best case scenario for electric vehicles would be charging at home, and that would be equivalent to 0.03 euros per liter. If we take a scenario with 50% public charging, we find again this figure of 7 to 9 times more expensive per kilometer to drive e-petrol cars. Next slide, please. Now, maybe taking a step back and addressing one of an argument we often hear about e-petrol, which is that we need synthetic fuels, we need e-fuels to decarbonize aviation. That is very true. We need to produce and ramp up e-kerosene production as the most scalable and effective decarbonization route for aviation. And we often hear that we would get as a co-product some e-fuel that needs to be used in the road sector or car sector. What the study has shown here is that this is not true. These co-products that you could have in terms of lighter fuels like e-petrol or e-gasoline, they're not necessarily have to be produced. So it is possible to produce via this Fischer-Tropsch process 100% e-kerosene. So you do not have any kind of volume of this fuel that necessarily would need to be consumed by cars. That is simply not true. It also means that investing into e-petrol production is very risky because there is no demand, and it's also very expensive, as we were showing. Next slide, please. Now, moving away from the price of the fuels into the air pollution impact. Running cars on e-fuels will not address or solve any of our air pollution issues. We have worked as TNE with a research organization called IFP Énergie Nouvelle to compare the emissions from cars using petrol and 3 different blends of e-petrol. The tests confirmed that cars powered by synthetic fuels produce comparable levels of pollutants, such as NOx, so nitrogen oxides, this is what is shown here on the graph, as well as particulate matter, compared to traditional fossil fuels. And that is very important. And these impacts on air quality and public health are particularly strong in cities. So European cities are facing air quality challenges, so introducing e-fuels will further compromise efforts in densely populated areas.
Lucia, I'm having
yes.
to do an unconventional thing of pause your presentation. You have not completed your presentation, but we're just going to pause it for 5 minutes because our MEP Michael Bloss, I know, has to leave in 5 minutes. So this is not the end of your speech, very unconventional, so thank you for your patience. But I'm just going to bring Michael, you in for your last words for the next 4 minutes. I mean, this has been a very compelling evidence for what you were saying before, that the cost effectiveness of this is not there. Also, there are many other important sectors which do need e-fuels to go forwards and prosper. The realities are quite clear, but there's still a big job to make these realities present and in the discussion with all of your colleagues in the European Parliament. We all have a job to do, you've said it. So maybe what are your closing remarks, your takeaway remarks for everyone here to move away and go away and come back and help you in the European Parliament to deliver what you think is needed?
Yeah, thank you very much. And sorry, Lucian, that I stopped you now or interrupted you. But I think it's very interesting also the question of, because that's one of the big things, but in the Fisher drop, if you produce e-kerosene for the sustainable aviation fuels, then it's anyway there. But yeah, really great argument, I think, and it's anyway there, but it's anyway expensive. That's also like really important to understand. And the public health, I think, is also important. But I think it is crucial that that industry takes a different position, because they are currently somehow also on a suicide mission with all of this debates about how this is difficult for e-mobility. And here in the European Parliament, really, like some people only got elected because they are like fighting against e-mobility. It is harmful in the long term, and they need to somehow understand that. So it would be really important to get them more working on not how to delay, but how to make it happen. I think there's several really great possibilities that are also currently being discussed, put forward. One is, and I think that's really important, the greening corporate fleet legislation that has been now mentioned again, for instance, by Séjourné in some articles. So really this needs to happen. I think it will be a great lead market for e-mobility. Of course, I want to make sure that it's then European cars that are in these fleets. I think the second thing is really to make sure that now all of the member states, they will put up their social climate plans, and they would have to actually be ready by June in order for it to start by 1st of January. In these plans, there should be social leasing, because I think it's important that like not only rich people are able to afford this. Third thing that I would say is important is that we work on the pricing, especially on public charging stations. I'm interested in thinking about some kind of roaming possibilities here, but something that makes it interesting, and then also to make this really a business case by investing into flexibilities, bi-directional charging. Lots of things to do, lots of things that can be done also from the political level. Then it comes also to the question of battery production here. But let's work together on pushing these proposals that are going into the future forward. And I think kind of the question is also how to break this debate. I think telling or like asking conservative MEPs, are they really engaging? Do you know that like your cultural war against e-mobility is really hurting the industry? They start to think about it. Yeah, we really have to kind of bring this back from a kind of ideological debate into a debate about what works and what doesn't work, and then bring things forward. And I hope that I have, and I'm sure that I have great allies in this. So like looking forward to keep working with you on this, and making sure that we also have maybe a bit broader alliances in the European Parliament to push in this direction. Thank you very much for making this webinar, and I'm looking forward to seeing you again.
Michael Bloss, a warm thank you from our side too. And I take away time to shift from discussing whether and how to delay to how to just make it happen. E-fuels being part of the distraction there. And Lucien, I'm going to move you back to your presentation, which we were midway through. You're now going to complete your presentation, and then we're going to move to an open discussion and Q&A together with all of the panelists. We already have some questions here in the chat, so I'd welcome any other questions to come in so we can have a nice panel discussion for the next half an hour as well. But Lucien, thanks for your patience. The floor is back to being yours.
Thank you, Chris. Excellent concluding remarks from Michael. I think we can go to the next slide. We're actually at the very end. This is my final slide on conclusions and recommendations. So it will tie also well with Michael's concluding remarks. I think in conclusion, we can definitely say that e-fuels pose a significant risk in the road transport. There is high costs, as I was just showing. It also creates a lot of regulatory uncertainty and health risks. So there's nothing to gain and much to lose. I want to highlight maybe 4 points here in terms of recommendations on this topic, specifically of e-fuels. The first one is that although using e-fuels in cars remains an extremely bad idea, if an exemption was to be allowed, as this was announced in the final compromise back in 2023 on the Car CO2 regulation, then if this happens, only cars running exclusively on 100% CO2 neutral e-fuels should be included, in line with the proposal from the Commission, which has since then been stuck and wasn't approved. The second point is really stressing the regulatory ambiguity point. We need to stop the uncertainty. These inconsistent and changing policies really delay consumer and fleet decisions. We also need to take those perspective that these endless and complex discussions are really undermining the shift to zero emission vehicles, also from a consumer and industry perspective. The third point is ensuring consumer protection about how these fuels would be used if they were used in cars. It's important to prevent misleading e-fuel claims and frauds through very clear labeling and dedicated infrastructure. So that means that shouldn't be any kind of blending, and there should be very robust and firm dedicated equipment like dedicated nozzles and sensors or additives to identify these fuels and track them and ensure that they are properly used by drivers. And then my final point is taking a broader perspective when it comes to decarbonization of transport. I mentioned the production of e-kerosene before, so we need e-fuel there. And these e-fuels, they will be rare, they will be expensive, in limited supply, so it's extremely important to prioritize them for the hard-to-abate sectors. For cars, as we discussed, we have electric vehicles, which are much more efficient. If we were to use just 10% of our new cars with e-fuels, we would be significantly increasing by 26% the overall renewable electricity generation in Europe. So synthetic fuels should be used in priority for planes and ships, which cannot use batteries to decarbonize. So thank you very much for the invitation and the occasion to present these findings. Happy to engage further in the conversation and answer questions.
Lucien, clear conclusions, targeted amendment, really important to set these strict rules on how and if e-fuels are going to be used, and also make sure they're going to the sectors that need them as well. And you provide some very compelling data-based evidence on the cost side of things and many other aspects. Before we bring in all of our other panelists, we've got some very specific questions for you from our group. Firstly, how have you defined average driver in your calculations? Can you say anything more on this?
Yes, we've used an assumption of 12,000 kilometers driven in a year. That's in line with the EU average. We have used the average fuel consumption of a petrol car. I think it's written on the bottom of the slide, but on top of my mind should be around 6 liters for 100 kilometers. And those are the main assumptions underpinning that.
Super. So we know you know your data. Thanks for passing that test. There was another, CO2 must be added to the fossil petrol cost is another comment from someone. I don't know if you have anything to say on that, but otherwise I would suggest we bring everyone on the screen and start the panel discussion. And just one general comment, and maybe it's for you, Lucien, and others first, but there's a very targeted amendment on e-fuels being discussed, but there are many other aspects to technology neutrality. Michael Bloss mentioned this as well. The discussion on plugins, the discussion on range extenders. How do you see all of these technologies come together in this discussion? And would you have any specific response on those elements of broadening the scope too? So Lucien, maybe to you first, and then I can bring you in, Adrian.
Yep, happy to take that question. So there, indeed, there are other, let's say, alternatives to electric cars that might be discussed, and one of them could be plug-in hybrids or you mentioned range extenders. What I would say briefly on this, because we have a study, also research coming up in the future, but range extender, it's I would say it's the same wine, old bottle. So basically a new kind of wrapper for what is still a hybrid technology. Range extenders are often advertised as having 700 kilometer range without specifying what is the electric range and what is the combustion range. And when you look at the data and the models available in the market, the vast majority of them have less than 200 kilometer range, which is often not sufficient for kind of the everyday use. And fundamentally, the issues that we have seen with plug-in hybrids linked to their use and that they're not sufficiently charged and often used on the petrol engine. Well, there's no reasons that this would be significantly different with these hybrids as well, which ultimately are also a sort of plug-in hybrid.
Adrian, from a CPO perspective, the discussion around plug-in hybrids, how do you see them? How is that for your business as well?
I'm 100% in line with what Lucien just said. From a public charging perspective, when we look at PHEVs, we see that we only have under 3% of our global charges realized by plug-in hybrid vehicles. We concretely see that these people may charge at home sometimes, but they don't charge in public infrastructures, and they go on petrol. All the data available in the market shows that more than 80% of the time a PHEV is driven, it's on petrol. It is not going electric because it's you don't change the way you drive with a plug-in hybrid car, and it will be exactly the same with extended range vehicles. I've recently heard that extended range vehicles plus e-fuels can be a magical solution because you have the best of both worlds, but in the end, as exactly what presented Lucien, going with e-fuels in terms of pollution of emissions, it's exactly the same than normal fossil fuels, and you won't see any difference from a CPO perspective. These cars won't charge in the infrastructures.
Paul, do you have anything to say about potential magical solutions here from an electricity perspective?
Well, I can say that, on the e-fuels debate and coming back also on the more, global perspective of what we can actually avoid, we are now already avoiding 1.5 million oil barrel imports per day just via having the e-mobility on the roads that we have, So let's just remind ourselves of that. And this more general security of supply dimension. There's not so many. This is the studies I have. or ranges I have in terms of estimations. I think Bloomberg did some work on this. So happy to hear also from others, from our participants and panelists, if there are other similar or accompanying estimations out there. But I think this is something that we need to look into.
Yeah, I remember 7 million electric cars on the European market. I think 7 billion euros of fuel savings for consumers along the way too. It's not just avoiding the fossil fuels, but it's saving money at the pump, as we're discussing. Related to costs, there is a question that has been received, and it's true. We've seen a massive reduction in cost of batteries in the last 10 years. EVs reducing cost as well, thanks to technology improvements, economies of scale. Couldn't the same happen with e-fuels? They're expensive now, but might they not reduce in the same level as we've seen for batteries and EVs? Would anyone like to come in on that question?
I'm happy to take that question. I think it's a very good question, and here it's important to understand that these costs for e-fuels and the different production routes that we presented in the report are expected to decline in the future. However, this decline is mainly influenced by the reduction of the renewable electricity cost and the capex of the electrolyzers. And so we expect them, what the study shows is that they will be relatively minor in the future, about 20% between 2030 and 2040. That's when we expect the most cost reduction. And that is because actually a lot of the technologies that are used are already mature, and a lot of the price and the costs are from, like I said, from the electricity, and those cannot really be compressed or drastically falling like we have seen for other technologies like battery, which follow basically a different cost reduction curve, much more aggressive. And finally, also what is important to note is that any reduction in electricity price will also benefit electric cars, which even if there are significant improvement on the e-fuel side, we will continue to see electric cars much, much cheaper than e-fuels, of course.
Yeah, I mean, it is an economic argument, and we're all trying to get to transport solutions which are as cheap as possible for Europeans. And I think there's a belief that electric cars will deliver that, not just in the operating costs, but also in the upfront costs too. Would anyone else like to come on in this cost discussion before we move on? Adrienne, maybe for you, and if you don't have a specific answer on that as well, a lot's been said about the cost of charging. It comes up as well, so I should give you the floor to give any answer to that, because it's often raised. But on the cost perspective overall of e-fuels, of charging of EVs, anything you'd like to bring?
Yeah. The question raised by MEP Bloss was quite interesting, in fact, because we see that to have competitiveness of EV compared to ICE vehicles, you need to have public charging affordable. Sometimes in some countries, yes, it's true that charging in public stations can be in the same range of price than going on fossil fuels, but that's not the case in most of the countries in Europe. We see that prices are going down year on year, and we, of course, charging in public will always remain more expensive than at home, because you need infrastructure. Building a station on a highway, it's between €1 million and €3 million per station. And you need to develop this infrastructure. You need to amortize this infrastructure. And with developing locally produced energy, with solar panels, with wind farms, with battery storage, you will reduce in the coming years more and more the prices of charges in the European network. And we're going toward this, because as charge point operators, we need people to adopt electric cars, and we know that by taking prices down, we will allow this again and again.
A question came in, well, comments, very rational arguments that everyone is putting forwards, very convincing and objective, especially on the consumer costs. At the same time, this is a discussion in a vacuum. Around us, we see that the concept of technology neutrality is becoming more and more mainstream, easier and easier to say that it's the way forwards. I saw that the Swedish centre-right party will now officially support technology neutrality, even though they were the ones with the EU presidency negotiating the 2035 CO2 limits just a few years ago. So how does this happen when your arguments are so clear, and yet this support for the concept of technology neutrality alongside that has gained traction? What would you say to that question from one of our panelists, whoever would like to come in?
I'm happy to start on that one. I think it's a very good question, and there's probably a lot to unpack there to really understand where this comes from. I think e-fuels have been seen by many in the industry side as a lifeline to keep the whole economy and ecosystem around fossil fuels, their production, refining, and distribution, as well as combustion engines and the whole suppliers associated with that, to allow them to keep that ecosystem alive, almost at any costs. And this was also supported maybe by some earlier estimates, which were much more optimistic on the price of green hydrogen. We're now being a bit more pragmatic and seeing that green hydrogen will not be as expensive, as cheap as some might have previously thought a couple of years ago. And so this created kind of an attractive narrative for the promotion of technology neutrality, in terms of allowing consumers, drivers, and Europeans to choose the technology they want. There's behind this also probably there's ultimately the only drivers that would be paying this price would be if we did have e-fuels in cars, would be premium Porsche drivers, most likely, because they would be the only ones able to afford it. So maybe some premium car makers do see an interest in this.
Maybe to add on that, if I may, after all, you cannot beat technology costs, right? This is going to be the ultimate litmus test, and I very much like this analogy you draw to hydrogen. We see this as well on hydrogen right now. There were very high hopes not that long ago on this, and now we have this reality check of, well, the costs will be actually quite high. There will be use cases, but they will be quite limited, and where they will be really needed, this is where the hydrogen production will actually be going in, So this analogy is just very right, and we just need to keep developing, keep using, keep rolling out electric vehicles. They are becoming more and more mainstream, which is such a positive and powerful story, So after all, and if you want, the analogy is the same for renewables. They were quite expensive if you just take offshore wind not that long ago, and now it's actually, we are on grid parity here, on cost competitive almost, in a good wind speed side. So if we just reveal what the costs are, what it really implies with regards to cost for consumers and use cases, which are then after all quite limited, I think here is the key to convince policymakers as well as users.
Yeah, and it is an exciting year. We've got loads of exciting European-made models coming to the market. You can just see around you that EVs are becoming better and better. And a lot of people say, okay, well, we expect towards the end of the decade that EVs will be there, they'll be the competitive option, and the shift will happen more naturally. But then, Adrian, to you, I think then there's a question, why do you still need the regulatory stability that you talk about for building up your own business at the moment? And I think it is important to you that there is that focus that remains, even if eventually the market will sort itself out. Would you like to say something on that?
Yes, this stability is absolutely key for CPOs because, as discussed, the chicken and the egg paradigm is there. We need to develop infrastructure beforehand to have to allow people to charge. But having discussions with all CPOs in the European market, all investors rely on the 2035 target to be focused, to have only battery electric vehicles sell after 2035, because going for only 100% electric is absolutely key for us. All our investments rely on this, and if you have all constant changes, if you allow to have e-fuels, to have carbon neutral technology and neutral technology in the market, you will see more and more CPOs disappearing, because they won't be able to reimburse the investor to have the necessary competitiveness against fossil fuel. And at the end, it's about not having infrastructure there, but you won't be able to charge because there won't be any CPO using and being able to fill this infrastructure concretely in the ground on the grid.
Brilliant. I see we're running through time, so I'm going to come to each speaker for a wrap-up remark, call to action. Very compelling, convincing evidence presented, rich discussion around some of the tensions involved in this debate. It's not simple. It isn't easy, this transition. There are jobs at stake. And so this is going to be highly politicized as we move forwards. We have the 2035 CO2 limits review on the horizon. Technology neutrality and e-fuels are a part of that. What would be your takeaway call to actions for taking this discussion forward to the wider audience that needs to hear it? I'll go from Lucien, Adrien, and Paul, as that's the order I see you on the screen. So Lucien, I'll start with you, and then we'll go through your call to action.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much for the invitation and for the rich discussion. I'll be brief, and just I want to stress that e-fuels would be a very expensive detour. There's nothing to gain, and it would just be delaying the transition to BEVs. So now what we need today is clear focus on the right policies to make sure that the transition to electric cars is a success, instead of having these discussions on which are just distractions. So thank you very much, and I hand over to the next one.
When is your study available? One question. You said about a new study. When's it going to be available, Lucien?
We don't have the date. I cannot share the date yet, but it will be soon.
The exclusive insights for participants of this webinar. Adrien, over to you. Your closing remarks.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you, platform, for the invitation. What I want to briefly say is that from the last EIA report, 25% of the cars globally are electric. Electrification is happening right now, and by delaying it in Europe, you will only reduce competitiveness of OEMs in Europe, of CPOs in Europe, against Chinese competition, which is arriving soon is already present in Europe. We need to fight back as Europeans because we have decarbonized and cheap electricity, and we need to focus on these assets to show and to have consumers adopting battery electric vehicles, because it's cheaper for them, it's better for the environment, and they will help European competitiveness.
Paul, the last word from our panelists. Over
Thank
to you.
Thanks a lot. Yeah, investors, let's remind ourselves, are always looking for regulatory certainty. So regulatory stability is key. What is really becoming a bad practice at European level is this shifts and reopening of previously agreed positions. So let's just be mindful about that. Regulatory stability is key. This sort of pathways that we have discussed, that we have agreed on, are key for regulatory stability. This is especially important for e-mobility because we are building the adjacent, power the charging infrastructure that Adrien was also referring to. So we need grid reinforcements, we need stable horizons where these grid reinforcements need to take place, at what pace and by when. What are the investment drivers? What are the hotspots for charging infrastructure after all? And this is just key for us to have this mid to long-term overview. I might just stop there, and just to add, technology costs. It's just key. You can't beat it, and you can't regulate them either. So just bear in mind where we are heading with e-mobility, and it's really compelling technology cost success story. Thank you.
Thanks to all our panelists. We've covered a lot of ground. We've talked about the economics. We've talked about the investment certainty. We've talked about the consumer perspective of this discussion. The message from our MEP Michael Bloss was a plea not to just delay, but to talk about how we can make this market work and how we can make sure that e-mobility is a European success story as we move forwards for jobs, for investments, and more. And to make sure that the e-fuels debate is contained to what it should be, is based on facts, and that these e-fuels are also going to the sectors that will really need them as they move forwards. Warm thank you from my side to all of the audience. As the moderator, we'll now hand over to the chair of the platform Electra for electromobility, Kinga, who will close this webinar and see us all out. So Kinga, thank you. The floor is yours to summarize and close this debate.
Thank you, Chris. And thank you to our sponsor, MEPs Lena Schilling and Michael Bloss, and our speakers, Paul, Adrien, Lucien, and the excellent moderation by Chris. Thanks also to you, our online participants, for attending these timely and insightful discussions. Today's conversation has made one thing clear to me. Policy stability is not just a political preference, it's an economic necessity. In the words of our opening speaker, MEP Schilling, electric cars are not perfect yet, but they are by far the closest thing we have to the real deal. So instead of trying stubbornly to find a different way, let us try to improve the one we already have. We heard many highly important arguments for electrification from our great speakers. But let's keep in mind for today and in focus for this ending of today's webinar, stability and predictability. Stability and predictability for investors, consumers, and manufacturers are key to invest into the transition. We hear time and again from the companies we represent, whether they are building batteries or manufacturing electric vehicles or developing the infrastructure that supports them, that they plan their investment 10 or even 15 years ahead or even more. These are high-risk, capital-intensive sectors, and what they value most is regulatory clarity. Yet today, with the suggestion of reopening the 2035 CO2 standards, we risk sending the exact opposite signal. And let's be honest, investors notice. They are watching what's happening in Europe and wondering if the policy path, which was agreed on, can still be relied upon. Increasing the role of not yet commercially available e-fuels would create regulatory uncertainty, discouraging investments into battery factories and delaying the transition to electromobility. I believe we heard a lot of good arguments around that. While global competitors strengthen their EV supply chains, Europe risks staying behind. We have seen today that in the global context, how political volatility undermines industrial confidence. The EU prides itself on being a predictable and democratic policymaker. But if we begin to mirror this volatility, we compromise this European strength. So at the platform, we strongly believe Europe must stand by its prior commitments and urge European lawmakers to reject the introduction of EU e-fuels in road transport. So let's keep also in mind what we heard today on cost. E-fuels require 5 times more energy than direct electrification. This inefficiency will place further strain on Europe's energy system, driving up electricity prices and thus impacting industries and consumers. Do we really want that? So for me, it is clear, and I hope also to today's audience, it's not an ideological question. E-fuels are inefficient, costly, and polluting distraction from Europe's electromobility goals. The EU must stay the course on direct electrification of road transport. So we thank you for joining us, and we encourage you to carry this conversation forward with your peers, with policymakers, and within your organizations. The slides and the recording of the webinar will shortly be available on the platform's website. With that, I thank you, and with this, we close today's webinar, wishing you a wonderful Friday and weekend.